So I recorded this 4 times and I butchered every one. And I had no idea why. Just got to own the authenticity and not feel like the camera is actually a person, even though you are people. So I interviewed Fiona Webby, and she's a general manager. She looks after 120 staff, or that's how big the organization is. So I assume that's how many she helps look after. And a big what they do is Tech Future Labs and Mind Labs. So its idea is around revolutionizing and digitizing the learning experience. So with learning, it's been the same for hundreds of years. It hasn't been a whole lot of change. Personally, I think it was to prepare people for factories, to engage in a system, to teach a certain level of conformity for the industrial age so that you can execute consistently. But now the creativity model and tailoring to each different learning styles really needs to up its game. So there's a few interesting things about reinventing yourself. I've made redundant, how to assess actually a learner's understanding. So instead of just written, making a visual representation, how to interact with staff, how to grow your business, how they actually did it. So it's quite a multi words. Anyways, it's a decent podcast. Fiona seems like she's a great communicator, and I imagine it's going to touch different audience members in different ways and add a lot of value. So we'll kick into it. I'll plug the newsletter. I'm doing a newsletter every month. If you're not subscribed, I don't know what you're doing with your life, because it saves you all the hassle of scrolling through the endless amount of content I make. I narrow it down to the best guests, the best. Maybe I shouldn't do best guess, because then they'll start feeling bad, wouldn't they? So far, it's the best guess. Let's kick into it. All right, well, we've got Fiona. That can also be Fee. And yeah, I think it's good to add a bit of context. I started off pretty much similar each time of sort of what you're doing at the moment, sort of the companies that you represent and what they do. Just gives context. And then we go deep into your past.
Cool, sounds good.
So, what do you do?
Yeah, okay. So, kia ora everyone. I'm Fee. I am the general manager at a place called the Mind Lab and also Tech Futures Lab. So, to put it into context, both are education institutes, all under really the one umbrella of the Mind Lab, but 2 brands. So, the Mind Lab is about upskilling people to build skills, knowledge, confidence in a changing world. And that started out in the education space. We started to upskill kids, and then we moved into teachers. So the Mind Lab is really about purpose, people who are doing things with purpose in sort of the non-for-profit space, whereas Tech Futures Lab is about emerging technologies, new business models, and the target audience is more kind of corporate and for-profit. Yeah.
Interesting. What made it... Did you go in the tech lab to fund the Mind Lab, or what made you go into those 2 spaces? Because they're kind of different and similar at the same time.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, our founder and CEO, Frances Valentine, she started the Mind Lab, which was obviously the children's space. She used to have actually media design school here in the city for 20 years, which was another tertiary institution. And that was looking at how do we provide skills to people when the world of film has become digitised. And so she sold that organisation after about 20 years and then saw a gap in the market where, in fact, the education system was basically being taught the same way for the last 100 years, and yet the world had moved on. And when I say the world had moved on, think about the internet. So the way in which you can get knowledge is different from a whole lot of different sources, and you can collaborate with people, you can create things, you can innovate. And yet the way of teaching was very much, teacher stands at the front of the class and dictates their knowledge, and then the child is expected to regurgitate that back to them. And so Frances was challenging the education industry and was a disruptor in the space to say, actually, let's get kids excited about learning again. Let's get them laughing, having fun, collaborating, failing, building resilience, choosing different paths, and problem solving. And so she did that through children, and then very quickly the teachers came on board and said, hey, all well and good to teach them, but what about us? And so that's when we partnered with Unitech at the time, and we created our first postgraduate program specifically for teachers to upskill teachers. And so that's now New Zealand's largest postgrad program, and that's in digital and collaborative learning. And so that's kind of where it all started. And that grew and grew into master's programs and micro credentials. And then what that allowed was Frances saw an insight in corporates, the fact that all these new technologies were coming like as a tsunami towards us, and yet a lot of those big corporates weren't necessarily preparing their people and their processes, their systems for that. And so she started with sort of one-day workshops, and then that led into master's programs, and now we have 15 programs across the two organisations. Yeah,
Nice.
So that's the really short story.
Yeah, you've done well. You practiced that, I can tell. So what would be the lessons around that digital learning piece? Like, we'll get into your story because I find that always fascinating. Yeah. But like, so where are sort of institutions or schooling or teachers sort of not quite landing in the digital space? Like, what makes it engaging or interactive? Or
Well, a big part of it is confidence is huge. So, people are scared by technology change, and I get that. Like, technology is changing so quickly. And if you're asking a teacher who, to give you context, average age is 55 and female in New Zealand, to suddenly use digital, collaborative, cloud-based tools to, and you probably do it, video editing or audio editing, and to upload them to a social media platform, make sure it can only be shared with your classroom and not the world. Examples like that's quite scary. And so our ambition and our approach is to make it as fun and as collaborative as possible. Because one of the beautiful things is that everyone's got knowledge and everyone's got different skills. So, for example, one of the things that we used to do for probably about the first 4 years or so was when we would go and teach teachers face-to-face, one of the first things we would do would be, you'd have 35 plus teachers in a room. They would get them into groups. They would self-select their groups, and we would say, here's a whole bunch of Play-Doh, and some paper and some pens, and just give them a whole lot of sort of things that would be in their classroom. And we'd say, what is knowledge? You've got 30 minutes to create a video and narrate it and upload it to a social media platform. Go do. And suddenly someone will say, well, I'm kind of creative, so I'll start with the plasticine or the Play-Doh. And someone will say, well, I can put the words around it, and this is what I think knowledge is. And someone will say, oh, well, I think this is what it is. And so you have all these inputs. And then someone will say, well, I know how to do the video. And so I'll jump on a phone. And someone will say, well, I know how to edit, and I know a little bit of social media. And so suddenly they realise that through the power of collaboration, they've actually collectively together worked out how to not only take, a really interesting topic, create something and upload it, and using digital platforms. And then suddenly you say, well, do you think you could do that tomorrow with your classroom? And they're like, absolutely. So you're giving them skills, you're giving them knowledge, you're giving them confidence to directly try and do that the next day in their classroom. And that's your sort of starting point for building that knowledge and confidence in their digital space. And suddenly they recognise they don't need to be experts. And that's what we want from our kids.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that, trepidation, change, something new. And then, when you're in the stress zone and you're not thinking clearly, pushing buttons and mucking up, and it just goes down the snowball of anxiety. So what, I'll be curious from, so I've built an online learning platform that sucks. Just to teach financial and life skills.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about from a video standpoint or an engagement standpoint, what's something if someone's creating a course that they should be mindful of to make sure that either the students are engaged with it or the instructor wants to create it?
Definitely taking people on a journey, and so that they know what's going to happen in that journey. And, summaries are always great. So in this video, you will learn X, Y, and Z, or your outtakes will be X, Y, and Z, or, I guess in the education world, we call them learning outcomes. Or it could be what you'd be expected to do. Give them things like how long it is, so that people have got that expectation of what the time is that they need to engage with that on. But yeah, the user experience around the learning journey is so important. And also giving them the ability to know what's coming up. So if they need to prepare themselves, if they need to do any pre-reading, but also how they engage with the outputs. So it's always great to have any kind of workshops or discussions, breakout groups. We love to have our Zoom sessions where we create breakout groups so that people can go and talk about a particular topic as well, because you learn from other people. So it could be that you give them a piece of content and then you invite them to come into maybe a social media platform or a Zoom session to be able to discuss.
Got it. Well, it makes sense. I mean, even just using that journey analogy, like if you're going on a trek, you don't know where you're going, how long it is, and even how to get there. It's going to be quite intimidating. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to have to unpack Fiona now.
Yeah, go for it.
You're very polished. Yeah, this general manager, you've been killing life for 7 years. We're going to loosen you up a little bit.
No, there's lots of faults here. I'm human.
Cool, let's start now. So where did it, like, what were you first interested in, or what had a profound impact on your life that was like a turning point?
Yeah, great question. Failure, funnily enough. So I grew up on a farm down in the Wairarapa. So we were about 11k outside of Martinborough on the White Rock Road. So I always knew I was going to boarding school because there were no schools close by. So I went to boarding school at the age of 11. So my brother was 10, I was 11, my sister was 12.
Sheep and beef or dairy?
Sheep and beef and cropping, yep.
So
deer.
you can crutch?
Yep. I wouldn't say I can crutch, no. I left that to Dad.
I used to be a wolf wrestler when I was 15.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. The bale was 4 times my weight.
Oh, yeah. I certainly did my fair share of underneath the wool shed with the sheep poo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
nice.
we used to sell it at the gate.
Rousey? Is that what they're called?
Yeah, totally.
You're Rousey.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool.
It's a lot of work. It's
Oh, it's mad.
yeah, you have to be pretty fit to do it.
Yeah, respect. Carry on, 10, 11, boarding school.
Yeah, and so, look, there's so many things to unpack, but I was just, one thing was one of the boarding schools I went to, I remember, it was basically boys' schools, so in Wanganui, and it was sort of 500 boys, and it had about 75 girls. And in the 2 years, so in my year it was 6th and 7th form, called 6th and 7th form, so 12 and 13. And things were changing. So I grew up in kind of the world of girls can do anything. It was a bit of a campaign within New Zealand of girls can do anything. And look, I don't know enough about where that campaign came from, but it was certainly a theme that was in my kind of teenage years. And interestingly enough, as I went through secondary school, probably, pushing boundaries and certainly going into the second secondary school that I went to, I had an incredible opportunity to be head girl. Interestingly enough, the school was traditional boys' school and head of school was always a boy. That's since now changed, but interestingly enough, I'll never forget this moment when we walked into the auditorium, we being the headmaster at the time, an incredible gentleman called Jonathan Hensman, and the head of school, John Johnson, and myself. And the headmaster looked at me as we were walking down into the auditorium of the full school and said, "Fee, you come up here." And so I was in line with John, the head of school, and it was a real moment in time for me about males and females being able to be on the same stage at the same time. And yet proportionally the school was 500 boys and 75 girls. But it's something that's really stuck with me. That gesture was a massive turning point and something that I've always taken through my career and my life about being able to have, no matter what your background is, have people on the equal footing on the same stage together. Because the more voices that you have, the more diversity of thought, the stronger you become as an individual, but as a collective. So that was certainly a learning point. But where I was kind of going with failure was when I went through university. Oh, actually, I went to London at 17, did a gap year, came back, went to university, having no idea what I wanted to do. But I got some good I call it good advice. Okay. Probably not every parent would think it was good advice, but Mum said to me, just go and be happy. Do whatever you want to do. Go where your friends are. So I went to Canterbury and I did an arts degree, very standard arts degree. And look, it definitely wasn't going to change the world, but I was happy and I was able to find out what I wanted to do. And through that process, I went on to do interior design at the local polytechnic down in Christchurch. For a year, at the end of my uni, so I think I was 4 years all up, went into my first interior design, or it's actually an architectural firm here in Auckland, and I was rubbish, like rubbish. I was dreadful at it. And so in my head, I'd like gone, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. And within a year, I was ringing mum going, oh my gosh, I suck. I totally suck. I am like bombing. And I was, they really needed people with really good drawing, like architectural drawing skills. And I'm the kid that always coloured outside of the lines, right? It was like, draw inside the line. No, I was never going to draw inside. I was always going out. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I thought I was going to do, and I'm terrible. And so mum just said to me, and again, I guess this is probably really interesting if any parents are listening to this. Mum said to me, doesn't matter, just get out, something will fall into your lap. And I was like, oh, like bawling my eyes out. I remember being on the Southern Motorway from Penrose driving back, bawling my eyes out because I was, 21 and going, oh my gosh.
You can still cry now if you want.
What I thought I was supposed to do, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Anyway, part of that role was Telstra Clear at Smails Farm, which is now Vodafone, I think. They were combining, so Telstra and Clear Communications were becoming one. And so that building was becoming open plan, and we were the architectural firm that was asked to come in and project manage the layout and everything. So I got into project management and I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. And I then got a job. So once I left, I got a job in a place called Irongate, New Zealand, which was a little small web development company. And it had its own e-commerce platform, email marketing engine, and it had a big contract with Vodafone to deliver handset testing for Vodafone Live. So you'll be far too young to remember this, but there was this Sharp flip phone, and on it had a content portal called Vodafone Live, and you could get ringtones, download like the Crazy Frog ringtone. You could get news updates, sport updates. And so we did the handset testing between Australia and New Zealand, 24 hours. And I was really fascinated with content and the internet and the power of the internet, and how what we call now is a WYSIWYG, which is what you see is what you get. So a content management system for websites where it's really easy to basically pull together a website and plug in e-commerce. And I was like, this is interesting. So it was sort of still early days, I guess, of internet.
When was it? Like early 2000s?
Early 2000s, yeah. I remember my boss getting up in the middle of the night to hear the updates that were coming from Google with what the algorithms were for search engines and what keywords we needed to put into the websites to get them up the algorithm, up the search rankings. And funnily enough, I loved that role, but I got made redundant from it. So I was third to join. We suddenly grew really quickly, 20 plus, and then I was the third to last to be made redundant. And again, my life crashed. I was like ringing mum, what am I going to do?
Mum's an important part.
I loved this. Mum is an important part. I don't think she'd really know, actually, these really defining moments. So I was driving up College Hill. It's funny what you remember, eh?
Crying again in the car. It
Crying
seems to be a theme.
Crying, like, literally, what am I going to do? And do you know what she said to me? She said, come home, work for 3 months, and go to London. Go and live with your sister. You got free accommodation in London. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I went home to Martinborough. I commuted to Wellington. So I jumped on the train from Featherston, commuted to Wellington in like a contract job for, it was called ECA at the time, which is energy efficiency. I forget what the new name for it is. So I did that for 3 months. I went to London with £1,000 and I lived with my sister. And that was the start of my real digital tech journey. But it's really interesting because failure was a massive, in both those, like first realising I wasn't going to be an interior designer, I was crap at it. And secondly, being made redundant, that importance of pivoting and going, shit, you get a chance to reinvent yourself.
It sounded like a place creativity goes to die, like you're drawing these very intricate things for the architecture, and you're very much not in that frame of mind.
Yeah.
But,
and look, there were people who were so good at it. And technically, so there was, the programs were ArchiCAD and AutoCAD, and when you saw someone who was good at it, I was just like, and I was so way off that. And also, I think I was young and I was arrogant. I wanted to run before walking. And actually project management allowed me to run because it was so busy and you're doing lots of different things and you're multitasking and lots of people interaction. And it was that passion of the people and the project management with the technical, the digital, and the excitement of digital that really, I guess, started to form where I wanted to go.
Well, there's a few things that that you've talked about is getting caught up in this new thing that you're pursuing, and then it wasn't quite what you expected, and then crying, calling mum, and then the next one return, you're like, fuck, I'm off again.
Yeah.
Well, so it sounds like prior to going on air, you talked about being extroverted and talking your way through problems and finding solutions. What do you think you would attest as your ability to navigate those key moments? Because there's people that could be made redundant in the next recession. We don't know when. It happens every 7 to 10 years. Hasn't happened in a while. What would your advice be to an extroverted person? Like your advice to yourself going through that new moment again?
Yeah, look, I'm a big believer in growth mindset, but that's kind of hard if you don't even know what it means or where to start. And I guess my take on it is optimism, like that there is always light at the end of the tunnel, and there's always another way, and there's always people who are willing to help out and open doors for you. And it's kind of hard when you're in a slightly dark place, or you're kind of going, oh my gosh, this is what I thought my career was going to be. But it's about taking those little small steps and reaching out to someone, whether that's a friend or an ex-colleague or one of your parents' friends, who might be able to give you some advice or open a door. And as soon as doors are opened for you, you start to build a little bit more confidence. And, things like going for a coffee with one of your mum or your dad's friends and asking them about their career path or what they may have done, any advice that they could give you about if you wanted to go and do some work experience somewhere, and just start trialing things. Like I also think I did a whole lot of temp jobs as well in my time, and realised also what I didn't want to do. And I think those are kind of important things to do, and then you start to find what you love, because even the role at Irongate, that was a temp job. That was like I was a handset tester. That's how I got in there, and then I just was like, oh, this is kind of interesting, and that started the digital journey. So yeah, that growth mindset is about being positive and about going, what could I do? What could my potential be if I just take this tiny little step? And asking, open-ended questions, what and how and if.
What about so growth mindset was, on the story about you, on the website, as well as something that you've talked about quite a lot, and the excitement and the new things. What do you think from either an organizational standpoint or an individual that's hoping to grow, that there's a framework that you might use to make it scalable and repeatable?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. Look, I'm a big fan of the A3 and putting things down on paper. So starting with passions. In fact, I did this with one of my colleagues on Friday, and I actually drew it up for her last night. So working through one of my colleagues' passions and where she wants to go next. So we basically sat down, and funnily enough, I was on my knees, and we kind of had a chair between us, and I had my notebook out, and we were just drawing. And I was like, okay, what are your values? Started with your values. What do you love doing? What are your passions? What does that look like? And as we started to kind of scribble circles and little words that were coming out of it, suddenly I could see the excitement in her start to grow, because it was personalized. It was us unpacking her and what she wanted to do. There's nothing worse than going into a role or doing something you're not passionate about. And you kind of wake up in the morning and you go, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? And it's quite soul destroying. And so I love the idea for someone to be able to grow and to be able to recognize their potential is start with the individual. Start with, yes, what they're good at, but what they're passionate about. And so what we did is we scribbled that down, And then we had some comms that afternoon, and she just, really thanked me for being in a safe environment. So that's another thing, is also making sure that there is psychological safety around someone's growth, making sure that they can be honest and open about the things that keep them awake at night, the things that they may want to have some more experience around or some development around, so that you can create that pathway for them and that safe environment for them to grow and to be okay with failure. And if they fail, you put a safety net underneath them, and then you let them go again and just keep growing. And so we worked this up on a piece of paper, and then last night I popped it into a Miro board. So Miro board is this great free online tool, which essentially you can do amazing things with it. But I love it because it's a visual tool, and it's collaborative. So I was able to kind of put these circles of her values and what she's good at, and I put her name at the heart of it. And we basically planned out all the things that she's going to do over the next 6 months. And then she is now in there collaborating with me on it and kind of growing out these areas. So she now has this visual representation that allows her to grow her mana and to take her to that next level. So starting with those things that make you happy and that you're good at.
That makes sense. I mean, if I was to unpack that, it's, in essence, you're finding a reason to suffer because growth's going to be uncomfortable at some point. You've got... They're motivated by their own internal value set, so that's the defining framework they approach things.
Yep.
And then they've got their passions and goals that are going to help them navigate the uncomfortable aspects of change.
Yeah.
Well, I can see, I used to do the leadership training for a team of 15, so I can understand one-on-one. You're talking to them, creating a safe space, but from an organizational standpoint, when you're getting 100,000 people,
yeah.
How do you create processes for safety or processes that allow them to talk about passions? Is that just a matter of delegation? Is that a matter of leading by example from the top down?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different things. Definitely leading by example, that's incredibly important for sure. But as you grow, that can be harder for teams, and particularly now as teams are more distributed, whether that be regionally, nationally, globally. We've got someone in Bali, we've got someone in the States right now. We've got, people down in Christchurch, Whangarei, you name it, they're everywhere. And sometimes they might not be able to see you in a workshop situation or in a meeting situation. They might see you online via Zoom or how you interact on Slack or Trello, whatever that may be. But sometimes that's not always seen. So it's about creating those processes. So interestingly enough, we are in the process of completely reimagining what our staff appraisal system looks like. And I love this because it came out of our Te Ara Kotahi working group, which I'll come back to, where a couple of the team members said, oh God, our staff appraisal system is dreadful. And then a couple of other people were like, yeah, it's like tick box. Oh, it feels so not us. It's so not our culture. And so there was a little working group that came out of that other working group, which was like, okay, let's take this on as a challenge. So these are staff members who, there's no hierarchy. They're just people from all parts of the organisation that have said, let's have a look at our growth, learning and development strategy, plan, process, so that we can create, as you say, that safety, that psychological safety, so that our people can then grow. So that's going through a whole reimagining process, which I love and can't wait to see what comes out of it. So that for us is going to be new. And as we've grown, because I still kind of think of us as a startup, but to be fair, we're 125 people, so clearly we're not a startup, but we still act in a startup kind of way, in the sense that we're agile, we're nimble, we have a fairly flat structure. But I wanted to kind of touch on where that came from. So, because this is kind of, I guess, a process that's quite important to us. So, Te Ara Kotahi is our teaching and learning strategy, and this came from grassroots. So, we're obviously an academic institution, tertiary education. A whole bunch of our educators were like, we need to embed our strategy and have a foundation so that we know how we are teaching and learning and how we're treating our students. So Te Ara Kotahi, which is this little badge that I'm wearing here, it signifies it. You, yeah. So there is a koru in the middle, which signifies our student.
Yeah. Around
the outside, there's these little triangles, which signify the noho taniwha, so the teeth of the taniwha. And then to the top it's all about reaching the summit. So te ara kōta here about reaching the summit. So we as a support network, all our staff, our facilitators, etc., are all about supporting our students to reach their personal summit, whatever that looks like. And so that has been a framework that we've rolled out to not only our students, but absolutely everything we do. And every team has an implementation plan around that, whether you're in sales, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in a teaching team. So that for us has been a tool, a framework that we use. The thing I love about that is it wasn't top-down led. It was led from people on the ground going, we need something. And actually, the leadership team were the last ones to get involved with that. And I love that. Because in many organisations, it would be the complete opposite.
Yeah. I agree. I probably shouldn't have said top down, to be fair.
No, not at all. No, because it does happen. It totally happens. Yeah, so it's kind of giving people that safe environment that a good idea, whether it's a strategy or a new program, can come from anywhere.
Yeah, no, smart. In terms of that summit that the students are trying to reach, do you have like a prerequisite course before they start where it's like, what are your goals, what are you trying to achieve? And then that makes them confident enough to pursue it, or how do you incentivize
learning?
We don't,
but I do like that idea.
Okay.
What we do have is we obviously have like inductions and intro and welcome sessions. Often they're online because people are distributed all across Aotearoa for that. And that allows people to kind of have a bit of a face-to-face, let's say on Zoom, to A, get to know the Zoom technology, but B, to go, who else are these people kind of learning with me? And because when we used to mainly face-to-face, on that first night of teaching, you could see the white knuckles. So you could see who was scared, and you could kind of jump on your knees, go up next to them on their level and go, how are you doing? How can I help you? Of course, now we've got a lot online. You have to look at different ways of doing that. Yeah.
Well, it seems like the overarching theme for you creating reassurance, people being fearful of learning or teaching. So it sounds like your focus is actually, how do I create a space, psychological safety for both staff and learners?
Massively. So important. Because, of course, so many people, because our average age of our students is about 44, so many of them haven't studied for years and years and years. Because we have this funny thing in New Zealand where you go and you get your degree, you tick a box and you go, yep, I'm done. Whereas globally, there's a lot more lifelong learning. It's really interesting. I don't know enough about it. I probably should look into it as to understand the psyche of why as New Zealanders we do that.
Well, I don't know about that, but it makes sense that you've created a process that garners for that age demographic. So it sounds like, without being too generalized, is that you're appealing to people that have an inspiration to learn or reinvent themselves, and they're coming in fearful because it's been so long. So the whole process of your business is centered around how do we create it safe for them to learn.
Yeah, definitely.
Makes sense.
And get excited again. Yeah. Because I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, but it's easy to get to a point in your career or a job where you go, oh, I'm done. This is boring. I don't really want. And so it's, how do you get someone excited about what their potential could be? Because as humans, our potential is massive. And it's, how do we keep growing? How do we unlock that? Communication and new connections and pushing people's boundaries and kind of getting them to think differently, or to get up and do something as a presentation or lead a workshop. All of that is growing people's ability, their potential.
Well, it makes sense. Most people I see, either online or in person, have a job they hate, a relationship they're disenchanted by, and a life they don't enjoy. And they go through that, and they use these different excuses. I'm going to raise my kids now. I'm going to do my degree first. I'm going to wait until they reach 65, and then they can't enjoy it. So I can imagine when someone comes across the opportunity to learn and reinvent themselves, it's quite motivational. Just on that, how do you appeal to the market? Like, what do you attribute to the growth that you have reached? Because you talked about staff. Is there like many student? Like, do you know how many students, or is it just like comes in rushes?
Yeah,
1 month you got cash flow, then you're like, oh crap.
Anywhere between 1,000 and 1,200 students a year.
Okay.
So that's on our tertiary programs. We actually have another part of the organisation, which is well, at the moment we've got one big project or number of big projects, but Digital Boost, you may or may not have heard of it, is to
Stan
upskill
Henry helped market
small.
it.
Yeah. So we won a government contract through MB in November 2020 to upskill small businesses to help them digitise. So that was the kind of the thing. So COVID hit, a whole lot of New Zealand businesses weren't online, and of course we're panicking, like, how do I keep my business going? And so the part of the COVID recovery package was a number of different things, initiatives. Digital Boost was one of them. So we were the digital learning platform. So we created hundreds of videos from scratch to take people on a learning journey, from I need a brand name. How do I do it? I need to buy a URL. How do I do it? Through to setting up a website and e-commerce, automated email marketing messages, plugging in Xero or MYOB, and a whole lot of things for small businesses. So actually, if you take in all of those students, we now have 48,000 students just on Digital Boost who are learning to digitise their businesses. So I guess from a tertiary education perspective, about 1,200 students, and then Digital Boost ongoing, 48,000 and growing.
Yeah, I mean, Digital Boost, could anyone listen to this, is free, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it is. Yes, absolutely. Yes, still free.
So does the government pay a grant for your help in that, or and they're also not necessarily, they're not known, well, you don't upset the government, but for other people, nothing to do with you, recurring cash flow and then paying on time can be some challenging.
Yeah, so we're kind of two parts of the organisation. So with our tertiary programs, so students will come through and pay their tertiary fees, their student fees for their program, and then we work with the Tertiary Education Commission for funding of each student, depending on what program they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
And then with Digital Boost, it's a depending on the project, where we're at with the scope of the project, then we're paid by MB, for example, to do that particular project, and that allows it to be free for the users. So we work with a bunch of government agencies. So I guess the other example is Education New Zealand. We've just launched Mission New Zealand, which is an education platform for a number of different tertiary institutions to take micro-credentials, which is essentially, short courses, 2 weeks, micro-credentials anywhere from 7 to 15 weeks, to a global audience. So as we're sort of starting to open our borders, that's all well and good, but obviously up until now we haven't been able to. So it's taking New Zealand education out to the world. So the ad campaign starts for that, I think, August. Yeah.
Well, you might not know, but I love marketing and sales. This is fascinating.
Yeah, cool.
So I think, okay, so if you had a salesperson in your organization, I don't know if you do, you probably do if you're a business, but who are they calling? What are they doing? So you've got are they focusing on the intermediaries? So these institutions that will feed students through that have a certain interest. Is it marketing to go direct to consumer? Is it partnering with businesses and doing chats and you've got 200 people and then it's better use of your time?
Gosh, we've got lots of different touch points. So if I kind of think back to the early days where we just had one tertiary program, which was teachers, right? Yeah. So easy. We knew where the teachers were. They're at schools. There is on education, on the, I forget what the domain is, but basically the education website, there is a open database of all of the schools that is accessible, and providing obviously you market to them a product that is specific to them, education, then that can be used. And so we, in the early days, we knew where teachers were. Easy. So we had what we call our outreach managers, equivalent to what you'd like sales.
Yeah.
They are able to contact schools, and we would have what we would call open evenings or pop-up labs. We would have a workshop, so a hands-on workshop, so the teachers would get excited about learning. So for example, they would build a car or a hovercraft in self-forming groups with some little plastic wheels and a little battery pack, and we would get them using their 21st century skills. So being collaborative, being creative, failing, being innovative, building resilience, problem solving, so that they could see the types of things that they could do with their teachers, with their kids. So we kind of use workshops as a strategy or a tactic for sales. Of course, down the line, COVID hit. So we couldn't do all the face-to-face stuff. We couldn't, go into a school and deliver morning teas and do a quick 10-minute presentation. teachers love morning teas. So that was kind of a
Okay,
tactic that we
that's
used.
interesting.
So
Free
I guess
food,
to answer your question is kind of knowing where your target audience is, obviously, and using tactics that they're going to respond to. So, as I said, the morning teas, they're time poor. So when do you get to them? You get to them at school during a lunch break or an afternoon tea break, and providing them with something that they can start to take back. So even the little workshops that we would do, whether they came on our program or not, they could do that workshop inside of their class the next day. So now going forward, as we now have 15 different programs, it's much larger in terms of how we do our sales and marketing. So from a sales perspective, is working out who our target audience is for each different program. We obviously have a number of different leads that come into our Salesforce, our CRM platform, and our outreach managers can pick them up and have a look at where they're at in the funnel, in the sales funnel, and then outreaches that they call them or they email them or they have Zoom calls with them and take them on a personal learning journey, because every student is different. So it's really tapping into the individual of what is important to them. And it's kind of what I was saying before about our staff, starting with what are their challenges, what do they love doing, where do they want to go, because at the end of the day we're human, it's tapping into that.
Yeah, I mean, salespeople get a bad name, but essentially it's just communication. It's identifying people's problems and solving in a way that makes sense to them. It's not too much to it, and building trust. Yeah. So the morning tea, so you call up the principal or something.
Normally the DP. The DPs are the doers. Yeah.
Okay.
Not to say that the principals aren't, but the DPs or the assistant principals are the ones who often are looking after professional development. Or it might be someone has reached out to us and have said, hey, part of my role is to do some professional development and for a bunch of people, so we'll help them form up whatever that looks like. So that's specifically for teachers. Something like we're about to launch an entrepreneurship micro-credential, so we've partnered with the entrepreneurship online publication, magazine, email, newsletters, and so we've gone down a route with them. So really depends on who the target audience is and what program we're looking at in terms of what our sales and marketing strategy is. Obviously,
poor marketing manager.
Massive role for our marketing director and our marketing managers. They are the most incredible human beings, and that they're constantly pivoting as well, because we're producing new programs all the time, and trying to come up with interesting strategies and tactics, and lots of content, lots of video content, lots of podcasts, because we've got a lot of stories to tell.
Are you on TikTok?
Do you know what? We're not on TikTok, but funny enough, on Digital Boost we obviously talk about TikTok. And then my old brain from my world of digital advertising and marketing, because of course I had 13 years in advertising agencies before joining the Mind Lab, would be like, how many platforms? Because you've got to manage all those platforms, right? And each platform, theoretically, you don't want to do same content because of the way in which people interact on those platforms is different as well. So you just got to kind of make sure you can manage. But man, TikTok's huge.
It's the most important platform.
It's massive. So you engage it? You love it?
Yeah.
You obviously, I've seen your stuff on it. Yeah.
Oh, have you seen me on TikTok?
Yeah. I saw you've got heaps of platforms, right?
Yeah. Well, it's similar to how you talked about the challenges teachers face because of the age demographic around technology. My competitors are that demographic. Yeah. Except men. Yeah. Not so much women. Yeah. They're coming.
Yeah.
They're coming. So I just like, okay, well, I can compete with the great white in the ocean, or I can compete with it in the desert. Yeah. And I know I can work hard, and I know I'll learn and understand people eventually. So I just spammed 70 pieces of content a week for years, and then something eventually started to happen.
Yeah, and you work out which one works for you, and yeah.
Well, the reality is any new platform, if it's well run, has too many users and not enough content. Established platforms like Facebook, you post it, you get 1% organic reach because they have too much content because marketers came in and saturated the market. Problem is when you do things like TikTok, people judge you, they think it's all new and that their demographic's not on it and blah, 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 because it's changed. It's something new. Yeah. So you can either capture, because, if you, let's say that podcast you talked about, you take some clips from it, you break it down to 15, 30 seconds, doesn't take long, and then just post it, and you can make it relevant to each platform. But Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, and TikTok, those were created to compete with TikTok.
Yes.
So they all perform pretty well similarly.
Yeah. And they're fun, right?
It's fun, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it.
Entertaining.
All it is a pipe.
Yeah.
You put whatever you want in it.
Yeah.
And you've probably seen in LinkedIn, it was a good one. It's starting to get saturated.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. Whatever business you have, it's all about attention. Like whoever's got the most attention and adds the most value is the one that's going to garner the greater audience and the bigger business. So
yeah, it's so funny because I remember 2 occasions when I was in London when a friend of mine who was in an ad agency at the time emailed me and said, "Fee, there's this thing called Facebook.
Yeah.
I think it would be up your alley." I remember the desk that I was sitting at Wonderman in London, and he had 22 friends. And I was like, 22 friends? Oh my gosh. I also remember the day another girl on my team emailed me and said, "Hey, there's this thing that's just launched called Twitter. I think we should be looking into it." And just thinking how far we've come with all these new platforms. And part of my role at that particular agency, Wonderman, working on Ford of Europe account, was investigating new social media, new platforms for Ford to see how they could market across Europe.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. And gosh, I mean, I'm not in that now, obviously, but wow, to navigate that now with all the new platforms coming out daily, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is every company's a media company or it's just a commodity. If people don't know your brand, you're not worth anything. Someone will come in, all this money, compete with you on price, and then you're cooked.
Yeah.
So, and you look back at the different things. So when the internet came out, it's just a fad, it's just a bubble, there's no point. But people that had their website, like you talked about, with the Vodafone days and the SEO focus, you probably imagine times where you're getting audience and you're like, can't imagine why, this is crazy. And then email marketing, 90% open rate.
Yeah.
People are like, email, no one's going to use email. Who's going to buy through email? Google AdWords, one of the biggest, do you know who one of the biggest users of Google AdWords were?
Were or now?
Were 2000s.
Oh, no.
Amazon.
Yeah, right.
So that's the thing. And it'll happen again, whether it's TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. There'll be something new and people will doubt it. Yeah. And meanwhile, I'll be creating content on it. And then they'll be like, oh, how did you get where you got? Or it's just, you're just making content. You got the attention at the most cost-effective price.
Yeah. And I noticed because your podcast is across, am I right in saying 9 different platforms?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have to edit it for all of those different platforms, or you can literally distribute the same content?
Yeah, just Anchor FM, free.
Yeah.
Spotify brought it.
Yeah.
And the way they monetize themselves is once you're at a certain scale, they say, hey, do you want us to facilitate an ad? I don't do that. So it's free.
Yeah, smart.
Get all the analytics.
Yeah.
Yeah, Audacity. I'm recording this on Audacity, free.
Yeah.
I'm not here to waste money.
Yeah.
I grew this from $80 a month marketing budget because, when I first started before the media company, a lot of our revenue just comes from funds under management.
Yes.
So a small percentage of that.
Yeah.
So you think about it, even if you got $10 million of funds under management, 1% of that, you're only making $100,000. And it takes a while. Like the average advisor after doing it 20, 30 years has 20 to 30 million funds under management. So you have to be efficient to work it out.
But this is the cool thing. There are so many amazing free tools out there that, she's saying Audacity, there's so many things that you can just play around with for free and get your content out there, or get whatever it is, whatever space you're playing in. And funnily enough, one of our programs is a little one, Digital Skills for the Workplace. That's one of the key things we talk about. Yes, it's skills, but also tools like, your Trellos and your Slacks and all the Google suite. There's just so much you can do for free.
I use Trello. I used, I never read the book, but Fiona, she's just arrived. She told me about the 7 habits of highly effective people, about how to manage workload.
Yes.
So there's important and urgent and not important. So I just categorize it for the year and then for the day, and then I just focus on those 6 things, and I use Trello. Move it, done, doing, waiting on someone else.
Amazing. It's a great tool. And that little matrix, I still use it too. It's brilliant.
What would be your list of best free tools then? That's interesting.
Trello's definitely up there. I love Trello. And for people who may be listening who are not familiar with it, I kind of think about it as it's a project management tool, but I use it for my personal life as well. So, for example, I'm part of a professional development group called CQ. We meet 3 times a year for 2 days each time. And out of it, I always have actions, and I'm accountable for my actions because I've got to front up to 8 other business owners, in 3 or 4 months' time. So I use Trello. It's like, what are my actions from CQ? Have I done them? So then, as you say, you can move them into done or doing, or do I need other help or other inputs from other people? We have Trello across the organisation for all the different teams, whether they're working on a project or whether they're an academic team, whether we're working on like a strategy, we'll have a Trello board for it, new program, it's great. Slack, I have a love-hate with Slack, I've got to admit. So again, for people listening, Slack is almost like it's sort of removed things or taken things away from email. So you don't kind of have an inbox, but you can have instant messaging, and you can have a number of different groups or hashtags about a particular topic. So for example, we have one which is I'm working from. So every morning people jump on the I'm working from hashtag, and we'll say whether they're in the lab or whether they're working from home. We have a health and safety one. I saw some people walking across the street when they should have been waiting for the little green man at the lights the other day. So I was able to put an alert on saying, hey, health and safety police here, please use the lights. So yeah, really good for not clogging your inbox. Look, I think the Google Suite is great. So again, for people who might be listening, so if you think about a Word doc or an Excel doc, a place to store things in the cloud, a calendar or multiple calendars. I think, Google is very easy to navigate, and depending on where you're at, it can be free. We sit inside what they call GAFE, Google Apps for Education, so it's free for our organisation and free for many people from home or small businesses as well. Obviously, you have your Gmail with that too. I mentioned Miro before. So Miro is an online free tool to help you brainstorm, workshop, mind map. Padlet. Padlet's another great one where it's almost like you can have if you picture a little waterfall, and each part of the waterfall is a little box, so people can collaboratively jump on and edit at the same time and put in ideas. So you might be on a Zoom session and you might go into breakout group and you'll have a Padlet and everyone will jump in and start collaboratively putting their ideas. You come back into the Zoom session with everybody, and you can review everyone's Padlet ideas. That's another great one. Coggle is not too dissimilar to Miro, where again you can do a whole lot of mind mapping. There's heaps of free tools. I could talk all day about them. Yes, yeah. We introduce them to students all the time, because everyone's different in how they learn, right? So you could say to someone, go and write a Word document, and they'll be like, ugh. Or you could say to someone, why don't you go and do a video of yourself and your experiences and your impact and how you're learning, how you can evidence your learning. And they go, whoa, cool. And then you go to someone, why don't you do a mind map? Well, why don't you run a workshop? And suddenly you see people's shoulders go back, and they're like, can I do that? Do I not have to write a big long essay? No. And I guess this is, part of why we're the disruptors as well, was because in the early days we went to NZQA, who, when we were getting our programs approved, traditionally it's you need to write what your assessment is. And we were kind of going, well, not everyone learns like that. So we actually pushed them to think about video assessment and video submissions. And in fact, if you think about it, you're less likely to get people plagiarizing, because it's them, it's their evidence, it's authentic, it's from what their point of view is. And of course, you get people who actually enjoy doing that. And yes, they're having to learn maybe some videoing and some editing skills, but again, they're learning rather than having to write. Not everyone's a great writer. Having all those different ideas and opportunities for people it helps people to grow. Yeah, I mean, that's innovative. I wouldn't have thought of that. It's going to be a challenge when those deep fake AI start getting good. But even then, like you can have a bot write for you now. Yeah. So that is an important step. Like, I sort of see the education system as a tree, and then you've got a dolphin, and you've got a giraffe, and you've got a monkey, and then you've got a leopard, and they're like, climate. So this real, like, I wrote a book, but writing is just too left feet for me. Like, words will just appear that I don't remember writing. Yeah, right. But if I could sit there and just talk shit on video, it would have rinsed it. You're happy, yeah. I'll be like, rough. Oh, and look, it's like we also have people that submit their assessments in te reo Māori. It's like, actually, if that's their native language and they feel really comfortable doing that, then we need to create an environment that they feel safe that they can do that. And we need to have markers, assessors, translators that also can mark and put them back. So yeah, it's putting the student, the individual, the human at the heart of things, and going, what can we do to empower them to learn, to grow, to evolve, to be better humans?
There's a balance there. I was talking to a brother recently. He's listened religiously to all our podcasts, so he'll probably hear this. But he Toreo was not the only thing spoken in his household, and now suddenly he's at school, and it's pretty tough. And I was saying the opposite happened to me. I studied Māori at year 9 and 10, and the majority of the class were Māori. So, and it was based on averages. So I got 65%. I was like, fuck yeah, and I failed because they were more than me. But then the challenge is, so on one hand, you want to accommodate, and why shouldn't you? Because, it's the native tongue of New Zealand, so you should include it.
Yeah.
And then also that, is there going to be an opportunity where they can demonstrate that learning using Te Reo? If there was, and it can funnel towards it, then you're preparing them for it.
Yeah.
If they're using that, and it's not progressing their opportunities, then it's, because on one hand you're helping them, one hand you're not.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And for them, I think it definitely comes down to what's important to them and what will progress them and help them out, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
Fair. All right, well, we're almost at the hour.
Wow, that's gone quickly. Crikey.
Yeah, so what would be some remarks or leaving remarks, either if it's a listener that's going through a journey that you've been through, or whether it's a student that's 44, stressed, doesn't think they can reinvent themselves?
Oh, do you know, I know we haven't even talked about it, but just high level values. Get to know your values. So I went through some really interesting personal development when I was at Saatchi & Saatchi's, 7 years ago now, and kind of going, I think I've reached my peak. I don't know. And I was sort of losing a bit of identity, and I was probably kind of hitting early 30s and going, I don't know if the advertising is still my jam. And I got sent on a course, funnily enough, with a bunch of my ASB clients at the time, and it was called Jolt Program through Mind Warriors. And one of the big things that we did was we identified our personal values. And my gosh, it was such a wake-up call for me, because I'd never done the work on myself. I didn't know what my values were and why they were important. And the reason I say this is, once I understood my values, and yes, they've changed a little bit over time, but once I understood my values, it helped me understand why things weren't working, or why I would come up against brick walls, or why things were uncomfortable for me. And so, to give you an example, one of my key values is collaboration. I love collaborating with people. I'm in a really happy place when I'm collaborating. And when I'm sort of a little bit off and I'm not kind of myself, I'm like, how much have I collaborated this week? And I'm like, oh. And so I'll give myself an opportunity to kind of get into a workshop situation, or jam with someone, or bounce some ideas and kind of get knowledge and insights from other people. And so if I'm in a weird, uncomfortable situation, I'll go back to my value set, and then it helps me to kind of go, that's why I'm feeling uncomfortable. It's okay. And that's because there's a misalignment in values. So that's key one, values. We've talked about growth mindset, big fan of growth mindset, workshopping stuff, put it down on paper, have a visual of where you want to go, say things out loud. My boss is a big believer in this as well. And I've said earlier, before we joined the podcast, I've said out loud, I'm going to do my master's this year. I've had years of infertility. I've now got a couple of beautiful, healthy kids. And so I'm now going, okay, I'm ready to go again. I've kind of, my head has been in getting pregnant and getting these kids and stuff. And I've got, as I said, beautiful kids. So now it's okay, my brain's ready to go again. So I'm going to do my master's. Surround yourself with good people. Good, positive people. Don't be afraid to ask people if they can introduce you to people. Open a door, have a coffee. I think my career journey has definitely been through leveraging contacts and people and opening doors. And you'll be amazed at how generous people are, and amazed at how generous New Zealanders are. And particularly people that have got a few years behind them, and someone would have looked after them, or would have said something great, or opened a door for them, they'll be equally as generous at opening a door for you. Be curious. Read, watch, listen. As we talked about before we started, listen to introverts. Love introverts, married an introvert. Enjoy what you do, and if you don't, stop and pivot. go back to what's important to you.
Aye.
There's a lot of things.
Yeah,
eh?
I did well. Did well. And I think anyone wanting to understand their values, a good thing you can look up is acceptance and commitment therapy. That's one that's purely focused on values and moving towards them. It's the new psychological literature.
Cool, I like it.
All right, well, where do they find you? Whether it's you or the organisation?
Yeah, so the organisation, so themindlab.com and techfutureslab.com. And then me personally, I'm Fiona Webby, the General Manager at the Mind Lab and Tech Futures Lab. You can find me on LinkedIn. By all means, connect with me. Love to hear from you. So yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for the time. This has been awesome.
Yeah,
loved it.
You pulled it together. So I'll leave that in the description, and thanks for coming.
Amazing. Thanks, Ryan. Cheers.